All right, hello everybody. We're going to go ahead and talk about community interactions today. In biology, community is a very specific term. A population is all of the organisms of one species in a given ecosystem, but a community is all of the species in that, all of the living species in that given ecosystem. So today we're going to talk about how they interact, and there's 5 primary ways that they interact with one another. The first one's going to be really obvious. You'll be like, yeah, duh. Competition. So competition arises when the niches of 2 organisms overlap. So what that means basically is that they need the same things. Maybe they need the same, maybe they're competing for a mate. Maybe they're competing for food or water or for shelter, all kinds of things that they could be competing for. It's called interspecific competition. So do you see the word species in that word? Right there, interspecies. So inter means it's when different species compete. I highlight the ER to help you notice. Different species is interspecific. So that's like what we see down at the bottom. Let me get that out of the way. The griffin vulture and the sand fox, they're competing for some food. So that would be an example of interspecific competition. However, you can also have competition of species, of organisms within the same species. So that's called intraspecific competition. That's when you have the same species competing. For example, maybe some male lions would compete with one another for the right to a pride of females and getting to father the next generation of cubs. And so that's called intraspecific competition. Competition is what forces survival of the fittest and what we think of as evolution. But I want to be really, really clear. We as human beings often think competition is good and it forces us to, do our best and whatever. And that is true, but to be clear, no animal, no organism wants to compete. They want to have all the resources that they want without having to fight for them, because when they have to fight for them, they can get injured, they lose energy, maybe they'll lose and not get that resource. So competition is for animals. They don't want to compete. And so the ideal is to get away from the others and not have to compete. All right, predation. You've all heard of this. This is when one individual called the predator captures, kills, and eats another individual called the prey. And I'm going to tell you that it happens quickly because we're about to learn about something called parasitism, where again, there's an organism that eats another, but that happens really gradually. So predation is more like hunting, capturing, eating, killing. It all happens super fast. That's predation. All right, the last 3 of these relationships are special because they're particularly close. They're called symbiotic relationships, and the symbiotic relationships often imply that they live in or on each other. So not always, but super, super close to one another. And so that's why it's called a symbiotic relationship. And there are 3 types of symbiotic relationships. The first one, which I just mentioned a moment ago, is called parasitism. This is where one individual is being harmed while the other is being benefited. So the examples here are these parasites that you may or may not have heard of. Parasites usually live in or on the host organism, that's the word for it, and they kill the host slowly. So the example on the left is a parasite called a mite, which sometimes animals get in their ears when their ears are really dirty, a dog ear, you might see that. They have these little mites, and the mites are eating skin and drinking blood, make the ear itch and that kind of thing. So the dog is being harmed by the mite, but the mite is getting food, so the mite is benefiting. And then the other picture here, that's a tapeworm that lives in our intestines. It's not supposed to be in our intestines. It might live in our intestines if we've gotten infected. And it can make an enormous worm that lives in the intestines. It releases eggs through poo. So when a person who's been infected poops, then eggs are released, microscopic, they don't know. And if somebody comes in contact with that poo, well, why would anybody come in contact with a human poo? In areas of the world where we don't have good drinking water, good clean water, if people are bathing in the same water that they're using to drink from, tapeworm gets spread really easily. So that's not something, we don't see a lot of tapeworm in the United States, but we do see it in many, many other areas of the world. All right, this is a quick FYI. There's a new it's not that new now. It's about 15 years old, actually. Hypothesis, they're calling it. It's called the hygiene hypothesis. And this is the idea that getting sick is good for us, and getting parasites is good for us. That getting sick strengthens our immune system so that when we really get sick, we have an immune system that's working well. And the same thing is true for getting parasites. Right now, especially in the United States, our drinking water is so clean that we very rarely get any kind of intestinal parasites. But there's been some studies, fascinating studies, that say that having a hookworm infestation, so that would be more common in areas of the world where they don't have clean drinking water, that actually helps our bodies, and that we're less likely to have asthma and allergy symptoms if we have a hookworm infestation. So hookworm lives in our intestines, and it's only you get it from drinking contaminated water. And for the most part, we don't have that in the U.S. And yet in the U.S., we have super high rates, higher than most areas of the world, of asthma and allergy symptoms. And so there may be a connection between having hookworm parasites and getting rid of allergy and asthma conditions. So interesting. All right. Our fourth relationship that we're going to talk about today is called mutualism. It is mutually beneficial. In this case, both organisms are helping each other, so they both benefit. The example on the left, there's a special kind of fungus on plant roots. It's got a long name. It's called mycorrhizae, and it pulls nutrients out of the soil, and then it feeds those nutrients, those minerals and that kind of thing, vitamins, so to speak, feeds them to the plant, and it helps the plant be healthier, and it helps the plant to grow better. In return, the plant is above ground and it's photosynthesizing and it's making glucose. It returns some of that glucose to the fungus down below. So the plant is feeding the fungus, and the fungus is helping the plant stay healthy. And so it benefits both of them. The pictures on the right show pollinators and flowers. And so pollinators, if you don't know this already, the flowers are giving food to the pollinators. And then the pollinators are accidentally, it doesn't matter that it's accidental, are accidentally carrying some of the pollen from one flower to another flower. And pollen is sperm, everybody, if you didn't know that. And so these pollinators are carrying packets of sperm from one flower to the next so that the flowers can reproduce. They can't move their pollen on their own, so they need somebody to carry it over. And so they're helping each other. The pollinators get food, the flowers get to reproduce. All right, the last one is called commensalism. This is far and away the trickiest one because nobody's ever heard this word before. So commensalism is when one benefits and the other is unaffected. It's not harmed, it's not helped. One is benefiting, the other is unaffected. So here's an example, and this is a less common example of a relationship, but the golden jackal and the tiger. So it says here, lone golden jackals trail tigers. They follow behind the tigers and then feed on the tiger's leftover kills. So a tiger kills an animal, it eats all it wants, it walks away and leaves a mess. The jackal comes behind and eats that mess. So the jackal is benefiting because it's getting a meal out of it without having had to hunt on its own, and it's being safe that way. But the tiger isn't being harmed because the tiger ate all that it wanted and now it walks away. So the tiger is unaffected and the jackal benefits. All right, that's it, everybody. Have a great day.